I recently celebrated my 16th birthday, and it was a moment to remember. Thanks to an incredible gift from my grandmother, she transferred ownership of her penthouse apartment to me. This luxurious apartment sits in the heart of the city, a place my grandmother occasionally visits while primarily living in the suburbs. Receiving this gift felt like a ray of sunshine in what has been a difficult year and a half. To give you some background, my life took a sharp turn when my father, who had always prioritized his career over our family, abruptly left us. He moved out without warning and broke the news to me through a text message, simply telling me to behave. This message came after he and my mother had already filed for divorce, something they revealed only around the time of his departure. My father never fully explained his reasons for leaving, citing overwhelming circumstances instead. Consequently, my brother and I were left in our mother's custody after a swift legal separation facilitated by our state's laws. As I was still grappling with these sudden changes, my mother dropped another bombshell. She had been dating a man named William for a few months and was now engaged to him. This news was a lot to digest, especially since William would soon be my stepfather. Our initial meetings were strained. He seemed distant and uninterested in forming a connection with me, even though he was playful and engaging with my younger brother. The situation became even more complicated when my mother announced that William had accepted a promising job offer out of state. They planned to move soon, and my mother wanted to take my brother with them, leaving me to stay with my grandmother. Despite my eagerness to join them and keep our family together, my mother insisted it was best for me to remain behind due to my established life, school, and friends. However, the truth soon surfaced. William expressed his belief that my hesitance and our weak bond meant I wouldn't fit well into their new family dynamic. This revelation stung deeply, especially coming from my mother, who I had always believed would support me unconditionally. Ultimately, I found myself in the penthouse, a sanctuary gifted by my grandmother, a space of my own amidst the chaos of family upheaval. This experience has been a bittersweet mix of feeling abandoned by my mother while being profoundly grateful for my grandmother's unwavering support during these turbulent times. After a heart-to-heart with my mother about her plans to move away with William, I realized I couldn't just wait for their departure. I made the decision to move in with my grandmother right away. Although it took a few days to organize the move, my mother tried to reassure me of her love, claiming her choices were about pursuing her own happiness. However, the tension between us escalated, and in my final days at home, we hardly spoke. When it came time to leave, I didn't say goodbye to her. It felt unnecessary and too painful. The only farewell that felt right was to my little brother, whose absence I knew I would feel deeply. Living with my grandmother has brought me the stability and compassion I desperately needed. Unlike my paternal grandparents, with whom we've had little contact, my grandmother has always been nurturing. Life with her has been filled with care and support, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil I experienced with my family. My school commutes may be longer, but that seems a small price to pay for the peace and love I now enjoy. Though I maintain contact with my mother to check in on my little brother, I avoid direct conversations with her. This arrangement held until my recent birthday, which my grandmother transformed into a surprise celebration. She invited my closest friends and some relatives, all organized through social media. The highlight of the day was when my grandmother revealed her gift to me, the penthouse apartment. She explained that her lawyer would manage the property until I turned 18, at which point it would be entirely mine. This news shone like a beacon of hope amid the emotional storms I've weathered this past year. However, news of this generous gift somehow reached my mother, leading to an unexpected and unwelcome proposition. She and William suggested that he adopt me on the condition that I convince my grandmother to transfer the penthouse ownership to him. This proposal felt like a betrayal rather than a blessing, and I flatly refused, telling my mother that I didn't want any further communication. She attempted to reach out again, but I ignored her calls and texts. Eventually, she sent a message explaining her situation, detailing how William had provided financial and emotional support after my father left. She painted a picture of the difficulties she faced with minimal financial help from my father, a stark contrast to the lifestyle we once enjoyed. Despite her attempts to justify her actions, her words only deepened the rift between us as I struggled to reconcile her pursuit of happiness with the consequences for our family. While I could understand her reliance on William's support, it didn't mitigate the gap her choices had created in our relationship. She acknowledged that William hadn't been very warm towards me, attributing his distant behavior to challenges he faced in previous relationships with children, which had led to significant problems and breakups. She insisted it was crucial to consider his past traumas as well. My mother reassured me that leaving me with my grandmother wasn't abandonment. Rather, she believed I would be well cared for, and that it was her way of pursuing her own happiness while ensuring I wasn't left alone. Now, with a new arrangement that supposedly allowed me to join them. She was eager for me to accept the offer and align with William's expectations so we could be a family again. She mentioned how much my brother missed me, hinting that my return could help mend our relationships. However, her message, laden with expectations for me to accommodate William's wishes just as she had, unsettled me deeply. It felt as if she were asking me to compromise my integrity for the sake of her new life. Despite her gentle tone, the underlying manipulation left a sour taste in my mouth. After taking some time to think, I responded firmly, making it clear that I would not bend to William's demands. I told her to proceed with her plans to move without me. When I discussed my stance with my grandmother, she firmly refused to transfer the penthouse to William, expressing distrust of his intentions and a desire to protect our family asset. The following morning, my mother unexpectedly showed up at my grandmother's place. I was at school at the time, but my grandmother filled me in as soon as I returned home. My mother had come to discuss the property transfer proposal, which I had already decisively rejected. I reiterated my refusal, confused as to why she hadn't understood my initial rejection during our last conversation. I was direct and possibly harsh, but given the circumstances, my frustration felt warranted. She broke down, claiming her intentions were all about making everyone happy, but I countered that it seemed more like she was focused on pleasing herself while expecting everyone else to conform to her wishes. I stood firm, expressing that I had my own life to consider and wouldn't jeopardize it just to appease her. She left abruptly, and later I discovered she had blocked me. This action made me reflect on our exchange. While I felt some guilt over my bluntness, the situation exposed long-standing issues that perhaps needed to be addressed. I realized I hadn't fully grasped the timing and depth of my mother's relationship with William, which may have begun even before the divorce. This revelation complicated my understanding of the situation. I had never considered the possibility of my mother being unfaithful, as it seemed so out of character for her. However, recent discussions and speculations had me questioning everything. Even though I'm hesitant to dive into those suspicions, it's especially difficult because the split means I can no longer talk to my little brother as I once did, and I miss him terribly. We've always been close, and now unsettling theories about his paternity are floating around, only adding to the confusion and hurt. In the past few days, my grandmother and I have tried to make sense of it all, but instead of clarity, it has led to more questions and a shifting perception of my mother. I've considered reaching out to my father for more clarity, although I'm uncertain if he'd be willing to discuss such sensitive topics. It's now been 4 days since my mother last tried to contact us, and she's gone as far as to block both me and my grandmother. Despite everything, my grandmother has remained my rock, offering support out of love without any financial demands from my mother. Her selflessness during her retirement years is something I deeply appreciate, even if it seems lost on my mother. Then, unexpectedly, my father visited. My grandmother had reached out to him but kept it from me to manage my expectations. His arrival took me by surprise, and it was even more shocking when he embraced me and apologized for everything. He sat us down and opened up about the deterioration of his marriage with my mother, which had begun long before their official separation. He confessed to having an affair with a coworker 4 years ago, which my mother discovered about a year ago. This revelation led to their divorce, during which my mother demanded silence about the affair in exchange for the house, full custody, and a generous financial settlement. Desperate to keep his actions under wraps and avoid losing my respect, my father agreed. He apologized for his past mistakes, especially for being overly focused on work and not being present for me. This conversation illuminated the complex family dynamics and the pressures that led to decisions made at the cost of our family's unity. With these revelations now on the table, I'm left to process this new information and what it means for my relationships with both of my parents. In his defense, my dad explained that the pressure to maintain the upscale lifestyle my mother desired pushed him to work tirelessly. He clarified that while he wasn't justifying his actions, he wanted me to understand it wasn't entirely his fault. He also shared the real reason for breaking his promise and visiting me without my mother's consent. My grandmother had left him a message mentioning William, asking if he knew him. Concerned, my dad rushed over, as he not only knew William but also had reservations about his character from their shared college days. When my parents were together in college, William had harbored feelings for my mom. At a gathering the night before their graduation, William drunkenly confessed his feelings to her, but she rejected him since she was with my dad. She kept this encounter from my father for 3 weeks before finally confessing, which led to a 5-month break where she briefly dated William. That relationship fizzled out, and she eventually returned to my dad. Upon reconciling, my dad asked my mom to cut off contact with William due to his discomfort. She initially agreed but later ignored his request. which caused significant strife and nearly ended their marriage. My dad recounted a particularly intense argument when William showed up at their apartment, leading to a physical altercation between the two. William had thought it would impress my mom, but it backfired, pushing her to sever ties with him for good, according to my dad. After college, William left town and disappeared from their lives for years. However, my dad suspected my mom reconnected with him after hearing rumors of his return to the city. He wasn't sure when she started talking to William again, but their current engagement suggested a deeper involvement, raising questions about her fidelity during their marriage. This revelation threw into doubt all the conditions she set during their divorce. My dad expressed his intention to confront my mother, but he promised to wait until I had spoken with her to uncover the full story. With all this new information swirling in my head, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure of whom to trust, as both my parents had let me down in different ways. Eventually, I decided it was time to confront my mom. Since she had blocked me, I had no choice but to show up unannounced. When she saw me, she was taken aback but allowed me inside, thankfully without William home at the time. I started off by feigning an apology, hoping to lower her defenses for a more open conversation. I carefully approached the topic, expressing my difficulty in accepting William so soon into our family. Using it as a pretext to delve deeper, I hinted at my doubts regarding the timing of her meeting William right after her divorce, trying to nudge her into revealing their past connections from college. However, she didn't immediately confess anything, leaving me to press further for the truth. When I confronted my mom, she remarked on how lucky she felt to have found William so quickly after the divorce, evading any admission of their prior acquaintance. My dad had shown me photos from their college days, confirming they all knew each other back then. My mom's evasive and outright denial about knowing William before only solidified my trust in my dad's version of events. Things took a turn when she, perhaps realizing her initial response was too vague, finally admitted she had never intended to tell me about her past with William. She confessed that her rushed engagement and plans to move away were driven by a desire to erase every reminder of my father from her life. Then she revealed the affair, the very secret she had leveraged for a favorable divorce settlement, despite promising my dad she wouldn't tell me. At that moment, I felt there was no reason to continue the conversation. I left abruptly and called my dad to inform him that he could proceed as he saw fit because I now knew the truth. While I recognized that my dad wasn't entirely blameless in the past, my mom's actions had cast her in a much worse light. After our confrontation, my dad insisted on a paternity test, which confirmed he is indeed my father. He's now seeking full custody, and since I'm 16, my preference for him to have custody will be taken into account. However, I am still living with my grandmother, while my dad and I are trying to mend our relationship. Many issues remain unresolved, and I feel most stable with my grandmother for now. My mother was furious when she realized my visit had been aimed at uncovering her secrets. She unblocked me long enough to express her anger before blocking me again, and we haven't spoken since. As for William, he left my mother almost as quickly as he had proposed, especially after learning my dad was challenging the financial arrangements from their divorce. It turned out there was no real job offer for William. His plan had been to use my mother's finances to support his uncle's grocery store. This deception was also his motive for trying to persuade me to transfer my inherited property to him. Meanwhile, my mother, instead of reflecting on her actions, chose to vent to her friends, who, in turn, gossiped about the situation. That's how my dad and I learned more details about the mess. Thankfully, my dad and I are committed to improving our relationship. He has promised to be more present and involved in my life. We hope that once he gains custody, or at least shared custody of my brother, we can work toward being a happier, if not entirely functional, family.